Old powers waken, shadows stir. An age of wonder and terror will soon be upon us. An age for gods and heroes.
The glass candles are burning, and you're listening to the Obsidian Nights podcast. Hello, my sweet summer children. I'm back with the juice to get you through the long night. And on today's episode of the Obsidian Nights podcast, where we go through A Song of Ice and Fire, chapter by chapter, looking for all the little clues and foreshadowings and hints and all the good juice. We are covering today Sansa 4. Jeez.
4?
I'm looking at the Roman numeral and I have no fucking idea what it is. Ivy. Why do I write shit in Roman numerals? I do not know, because the books do. But it's chapter 51. It's Sansa's POV, and it's like peak Sansa. Like, this is the reason why so many people do not like Sansa. It is this chapter right here. Why? This chapter. So we're going to get to talk about it. And today I am joined by my special guest, Casey. Casey, would you like to let everyone know who you are and where they can find you?
Hi, I'm Casey, and I am on YouTube as House Lorebridge and on Discord as Lorebridge. And I am excited to get into this Sansa because this is a good one. This is a good Sansa chapter.
This is a very good Sansa chapter. So for this Sansa chapter, I'm just going to give a little bit of background of what's been going on so far. So Ned has been arrested. There's been like this whole Winterfell wipeout in King's Landing, and Sansa has been locked up in her room. And let's get into the juice. They came for Sansa on the third day. She chose a simple dress of dark gray wool, plainly cut but richly embroidered around the collar and sleeves. Her fingers felt thick and clumsy as she struggled with the silver fastenings without the benefit of servants. Jane Poole had been confined with her, but Jane was useless. Her face was puffy from all her crying, and she could not seem to stop sobbing about her father. "I'm certain your father is well," Sansa told her when she had finally gotten the dress button right. "I'll ask the queen to let you see him," she thought. That kindness might lift Jane's spirits. But the other girl just looked at her with red, swollen eyes and began to cry all the harder. She was such a child. Sansa had wept too, the first day. Even within the stout walls of Maegor's holdfast, with her door closed and barred, it was hard not to be terrified when the killing began. She had grown up to the sound of steel in the yard, and scarcely a day of her life had passed without hearing the clash of sword on sword. Yet somehow, knowing that the fighting was real made all the difference in the world. She heard it as she had never heard it before, and there were other sounds as well, grunts of pain, angry curses, shouts for help, and the moans of wounded and dying men. In the songs, the knights never screamed nor begged for mercy. Whew, child.
Mm-hmm.
So Jane Poole's father, Van Poole, is dead. Like, let's start there. Her father's dead. And I think Jane Poole is smart enough to kind of know her father's dead. Like, she fears that her father's dead. Sansa saying that she's such a child because she's crying is annoying as fuck.
It really is. It shows a complete lack of empathy on Sansa's part, because if Sansa had seen what Jane likely saw before she got shoved in that room, like, she'd be way more freaked out and a lot less naive about it.
Yeah.
Than she is. I think this is just her willful ignorance. She wants to think that everything's fine.
Yeah. Sansa, she's constantly comparing things to the songs and the stories of the past. And I get it, but at the same time, I don't, because everything that she's been shown since she's gotten to King's Landing has contradicted all of those stories. And she says it like the knights never begged for mercy. And like in the last Sansa chapter, she talks about how she had a dream of Joffrey that he killed a beast. And in the songs, they never kill beasts. They never kill the magical beast. And it's like you keep getting these songs shattered, but you still believe in them and you still want to keep those stories alive in your head. And I kind of think that it's like a defensive mechanism in a sense. I know, like, we all talk about, I'm not going to say we all, because there's plenty of people that love Sansa.
Right.
Me personally, I don't love early Sansa. Like, I appreciate what she is as a character, which is a dumb, naive child in a game that is made for adults, where she's in a position she should never have to be in, but she is in this position. And that's kind of what life is. Life isn't fair. And it's not fair that Sansa is in the position that she's in, but a lot of the position she is in, she has put herself in, which is her fault and not her fault at the same time. She is a child.
Right.
Like she wasn't taught what to do in these situations that she's facing. But at the same time, the things that she was taught, like to obey her father or obey her parents or obey adults in general, then she throws that out the window too. She's willful. She's willful, and she's also ambitious.
Well, it seems like she was pretty obedient there for a little while, but when she got to King's Landing, and especially with the events of Ned wanting to send the girls away and everything, like, she chose possibly the worst moment that she could have picked to get a little rebellious and say, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah.
Like, this is the worst time for preteen rebellion.
Yeah, and it kind of comes from, I mean, she's a young girl that like dreams of these songs and stories and stuff, and she is looking at herself as a figure in one of them, like the future queen of Westeros. Like, that is a big aspiration and that is a big ambition, and she's already halfway there. Like, her betrothal to Joffrey basically makes her the future queen of Westeros, and she didn't want to let that go. Now, if she knew that her actions would cause her father's death or cause the wipeout of the Winterfell, like, if she knew that what she was going to do was going to hurt her family the way it did, do you still think she would have made that decision? I don't think so.
If she believed that this would actually happen, like if someone was like, hey, I'm from 2 weeks in the future, and if you do this, this is how it's going to go. If she believed it, I don't think she would have.
Yeah.
People are going to hate me for saying this, but I do think that she is a smart girl. She just wants so bad to be in love with the glitz and the glamour of her betrothal and King's Landing and the knights and the ladies and all that. And she just doesn't want that dream taken away from her, because that's what she's dreamed of her whole life.
Right.
She's hated the North and how bleak it is. And then she gets this prince to take her away to this wonderful kingdom. And it just sounds so great.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to believe that any of this is happening. And I can't entirely say I blame her when she's, 11?
Yeah.
12 when all this is going down?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I don't blame her either. Like, there's people right now that are in relationships with people, and they're actually in relationships with terrible people, but they had this fantasy of who this person is in their head. So they don't.
It's that whole being in love with the idea of love thing.
Yeah.
Just that overly romanticized goal that she has in her head without taking into account what real life is. And I think part of that is how she was raised, how Catelyn raised her, how Ned didn't really do much with the girls because, the girls go with mom, the boys go with dad thing. And also just the North is so far removed from the politics of the South
Yes.
that, like, even Catelyn growing up in River Run, for example, even she had a better taste of what the politics of the realm really was.
Right.
But the North is so far removed, like, ever since Sansa was born, like, I don't think that she'd even really seen Robert or Cersei or any of the court visit the North or anything, or if she had, she was a baby at the time. So she just doesn't have a clue at all and wasn't prepared for it in the slightest.
No, she wasn't. And it's hard because it's easy to hate Sansa. Like, I'm not gonna like sit here and be like, oh, I love Sansa, because that would be a fucking lie. Because
Right.
I do not like her, but I do empathize with her. Now, I don't like a Game of Thrones Sansa, but when we get into a Feast for Crows and we get into a Storm of Swords, when she starts coming around and realizing, I think when she drops the fantasy, it's when I really begin to like her. I actually can't see the Sansa, that book Sansa, not being the way the show Sansa was with Daenerys. Like, I just can't see that.
No, I can't either.
Because it's just not smart. And she is smart. Like, yeah, she does dumb, foolish shit, but when she gets to the Vale and she starts doing shit for Sweet Robin, and like when she becomes Elaine Stone, she's very smart. Very smart.
Well, and even after, she ends up married to Tyrion and is still stuck in King's Landing, even then, like, the wheels are starting to turn. They're slow moving because she can't really make any moves down there.
Yeah.
But, like, the wheels are starting to turn, and she's in survival mode, but she's also learning. She hasn't completely shut down.
Yeah.
I don't think.
And trauma, like, she's went, by the time we get a little further ahead, like, she's experienced trauma. She's had some real life experience. So when she's coming to King's Landing, like, listen, she's been born, when she was born in Winterfell, the bells rung day and night. The Warden of the North's first daughter has been born. She's so beautiful. Like, she's been worshipped her whole life. And when she comes to King's Landing, that is the attitude that she brings with her. And that's no fault of her own. That's just how she was raised. And then the first taste of something isn't right here is what happens on the Trident with Lady.
Right.
And then she kind of pushes that, she like suppresses that down and tries to still be with Joffrey. And then she experiences this trauma, which she hasn't seen the repercussions of this shit yet. But then she goes through the trauma of losing her dad, and the trauma, like, she has so much trauma that shit changes people. When people go through shit, I don't care how minimal it is, like a breakup, anything that is traumatic emotionally changes you. So
exactly,
that quote about Sansa, what is it? I went from porcelain to ivory to steel.
Something like that, yeah.
It's something like that. And I love that quote about Sansa, because to me, she's evolving from the traumas that she's been to. Because when she came to Winterfell, she was a clean, pure slate. I mean, when she came to King's Landing, and now we're seeing it unfold. And it's not pretty.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't excuse the mistakes she made entirely, because they did have severe repercussions. So I don't want to sound like one of those people who like Sansa who's trying to excuse it. But at the end of the day, she was a very naive and still very much a child. It doesn't matter if, she lived in a time where the world was brutal and she should have known better. The fact is that she didn't. And she's still a child, and all children have their dreams.
Yeah.
And no child wants to know what adult life is really like, whether it's the year 2021 or back in King's Landing in the first of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Like, she couldn't have even processed what the world was actually like at that point in her life, with the privilege that she was born into. Was she lower born, then perhaps, but she couldn't have even processed this shit show that this world really is.
Not indeed. There's no way. So I wanted to talk about Jean Poole a little bit because I feel like this girl's story is so traumatic. So
Oh, God.
Sansa is like pent up in the room. So she hears what's going on.
Right.
He hears what's going on. But Jean Poole actually sees some of it before she's pushed into the room. Jean is like, they're killing everyone. When Jean is pushed into the room, she's bruised and she's shaking and she's crying and she's telling Sansa, they're killing everyone. Like she screams it at her and like she's going on and on and on.
Yeah, she goes on about the bodies that she saw everywhere, and you know how the Hound had broken down her door with a warhammer or something. Like, so she's giving Sansa examples. She's not just being dramatic, screaming, they're killing everyone. Like, she's giving facts.
Yeah.
And Sansa's still just her rose-colored glasses on, her blinders on, la, la, la. I'm not hearing this. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is. But at the same time, like Sansa, when she is first pushed into the room, like Sansa dries her tears, like her own tears, because Sansa's crying at that time because she doesn't really know what's going on. And she like comforts Jean Poole and they sleep in the same bed, like holding each other like sisters. And it's like, that is a moment of Sansa showing like empathy, but then she takes it away when she's like, she's such a child, like she's still crying. Of course, she's still crying. So that was on the first day. So the second day was even worse. The room where Sansa had been confined was at the top of the highest tower of Maegor's Holdfast. From its window, she could see that the heavy iron portcullis in the gatehouse was down, and the drawbridge drawn up over the deep, dry moat that separated the keep within a keep from the larger castle that surrounded it. Lannister guardsmen prowled the walls with spears and crossbows to hand. The fighting was over, and the silence of the grave had settled over the Red Keep. The only sounds were Jean Poole's endless whimpers and sobs. They were fed hard cheese and fresh baked bread and milk to break their fast, roast chicken and greens at midday, and a late supper of beef and barley stew. But the servants who brought the meals would not answer Sansa's questions. That evening, some woman brought her clothes from the Tower of the Hand and some of Jean's things as well. But they seemed nearly as frightened as Jean, and when she tried to talk to them, they fled from her as if she had the gray plague. The guards outside the door still refused to let them leave the room. Please, I need to speak to the queen again, Sansa told them, as she told everyone she saw that day. She'll want to talk to me. I know she will. Tell her I want to see her, please. If not the queen, then Prince Joffrey, if you'd be so kind. We're to marry when we're older. So she's still like oblivious to what is actually going on. She's oblivious. Like she doesn't see that these people aren't talking to you because they've been instructed not to talk to you. And it's the queen that has you in this position. Like, who do you think puts you there? She knows like exactly where you are.
Yeah, like she went to sleep, like feeling empathetic and scared and everything, and she woke up and decided to put that entitlement back on. And I am who I am, so I want to see the queen. I want to see Joffrey. We're supposed to get married. Like she's pulling out every card that she has to try and like force this issue, and she's just those blinders, man.
Mm-hmm. So she says on that night of the second day, like the bells started tolling all through the city. And she said, the sound rumbled across the city like thunder, warning of the storm to come. So, yeah. So on the second day, the bells are tolling and ringing. And I love that foreshadowing of a storm coming because there is a storm coming. And the Lord of Storm's End wants his throne back. Like not the Lord of the rightful Lord of Storm's End, wants his throne back, wants his throne, and that's Stannis Baratheon. So Stannis Baratheon is the storm that's coming, in a sense.
Yeah,
in a sense. And
Yeah, he does come later on.
Yeah, he does end up coming to King's Landing later on. And I feel like the storm could be so many people. Like, you're going to have Stannis coming to King's Landing. You might have Dany Stormborn coming to King's Landing. And you might have Euron coming to King's Landing all at one point in the future, like that we haven't gotten to yet. They all have storm references in their name.
Yeah, well, and then the following books.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even Storm in the title there.
Storm of Swords. Yeah. So, they're like, Jean is like covering her ears and they're like, why are they ringing the bells? And they're like, the king is dead. So they don't even really know that Robert's dead yet.
Right.
They don't even know that he's dead. They're like, well, maybe somebody stormed the castle and killed King Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know what the fighting is about. Like, so Sansa says that she went to sleep wondering, restless and fearful. Was her beautiful Joffrey the king now, or had they killed him too? She was afraid for him and for her father. If only they would tell her what was happening. That night, Sansa dreamt of Joffrey on the throne with herself seated beside him in a gown of woven gold. She had a crown on her head, and everyone she had ever known came before her to bend the knee and say their courtesies.
That just shows where her mind is. Like, I think, like, somewhere in her mind, she knows that something has gone terribly sideways and that this shit is not okay, but she just wants so badly for everything to go to plan with her marrying Joffrey, becoming queen, all that.
Yes.
And if King Robert's dead, she thinks that she automatically has a shoo-in.
Yes, she does. And she loves it.
She's a child.
Yeah, she's a
just
child.
such a child, and it's just so frustrating.
Yeah, it is. So the next morning, Sir Boris Blunt comes. He's a Kingsguard. He comes to get Sansa and take her to the queen. So this is the third day. That's why the chapter starts out with, they came for her on the third day.
Yeah.
So here we go. So Sansa goes to see Cersei. And Cersei, asks, like, have you been taken care of? And like all this fake ass shit. Like, Cersei knows exactly what's been going on. And Sansa is not smart enough to put that together yet. Cersei is also like really fucking pissed that Gene Poole was put in the room with Sansa because she doesn't want anyone saying shit to Sansa. She was
worried that Sansa might have some heads up about what's going on and she wouldn't be as easy to manipulate.
Yes.
She wants Sansa nice and malleable so she can feed her whatever she wants because she knows how much Sansa wants this dream and that she'll just accept it.
Yeah, and one of my favorite lines is like when Cersei is like, to keep you safe, my sweet one, Queen Cersei had told her, Joffrey would never forgive me if anything happened to his precious. Like, Joffrey doesn't give a fuck. Joffrey would kill her himself if he just got the chance. Because I don't think Joffrey started out hating Sansa, but when Sansa saw him being a coward, and
when she saw him being attacked by Nymeria.
And Arya getting the best of him.
Yeah, even though Sansa was on his side, like 110%, that's when Joffrey started to hate her because
he was
embarrassed.
And she saw what he was.
And she should have paid attention to that.
She didn't. She didn't, but his mask fell. Like that Galliant print, that mask fell. And she saw who he was, and he hated her for it. He hated her because she saw him. Even though she didn't acknowledge it, even though she was on his side, even though she ignored that he was a piece of shit, she saw him. And that's why he hated Tyrion. He hated Tyrion because Tyrion knew exactly what he was and called him out on that shit every time. And that's why he hated him. It wasn't because he was a dwarf. If Tyrion kissed his ass like everyone else, he would have loved Tyrion.
I'm sure that part in the book where Tyrion slaps Joffrey in Winterfell after Bran's fall, I'm sure that is not the first time Tyrion has done that.
Oh, yeah. No, of course not. So they come in and they're like, I've brought the girl. Sansa had hoped Joffrey might be with her. Her prince was not there, but 3 of the king's counselors were. Lord Peter Baelish sat on the queen's left hand, Grand Maester Pycelle at the end of the table, while Lord Varys hovered over them, smelling flowery. All of them were clad in black, she realized, with a feeling of dread in mourning clothes. So the small council's all wearing black because the king is dead. So that's their mourning clothes, funeral clothes, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Cersei orders that Jean Poole and Sansa be separated. That's the first thing. Like they don't want them together. And Sansa's like, I don't understand. Where's Jean's father? Like, she doesn't understand, like, that's her father is dead. Like, Jean's father is dead. He was killed during the Winterfell wipeout.
Yeah.
And why can't Sir Boros take Jean to her father? Like, what does Lord Peter have? Like, what does he have to do with it? Like, why does she have to go there? And she's like, that she had promised herself she would be a lady, gentle as a queen, and as strong as her mother, the Lady Catelyn. But all of a sudden, she was scared again. For a second, she thought she might cry. Where are you sending her? She hasn't done anything wrong. She's a good girl. And Cersei's like, but she's upset you. We can't be having that. And it's like, Cersei is so fucking manipulative. Like, she's such a narcissist. Like, me and Alicia did a special that's going to be coming out on Obsidian Nights about Cersei, and Alicia talks about Cersei's narcissism, and like, I can see it. Like, she's really fucking with Sansa's head here.
And she's good at it, and she knows how good she is at it.
Mm-hmm.
And Sansa, where she's just so young and wants to believe everything good, I mean, she's just too easy.
Yeah, she really is. So Cersei is like, sweet Sansa. And she's like, such a beautiful child. I do hope you know how much Joffrey and I love you. Sansa's like, you do? And Cersei's like, I think of you almost as my own daughter, and I know the love you bear for Joffrey. I am afraid we have some grave news about your Lord Father. You must be brave, child. And Sansa like gets chills. What? And she's like, what is it? And Cersei's like, your father is a traitor. And Grand Maester Pycelle is like, with my own ears, I heard Lord Eddard swear to our beloved King Robert that he would protect the young princes, and if they were his own sons. And yet the moment the king was dead, he called the small council together to steal Prince Joffrey's rightful throne. And Sansa's like, no, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't. And Cersei is like, well, we found this on the captain of your household guard. And it's the letter to Stannis, telling him to take the crown.
Yeah.
And Sansa's like, your grace, there's been a mistake. And she's like, starts to panic. And she's like, please send for my father. He'll tell you he would never write such a letter. The king was his friend. And Cersei's like, Robert thought so. This betrayal would have broken his heart. The gods are kind that he did not live to see it. Sansa, sweetling, you must see what a dreadful position this has left us in. You are innocent of any wrong. We all know that. And yet you are the daughter of a traitor. How can I allow you to marry my son? So Cersei takes the manipulative tactic to like take the ultimate thing that Sansa wants, which is to marry Joffrey, and dangle that on what her next move is going to be.
Right.
And Sansa's like, I love him, but I love him.
Right. And Cersei's smart to do that, because with Sansa panicking and she's like, my dad wouldn't do that. This isn't right. Like, he and Robert were friends. All that. Like, Cersei knows that she is so close to putting it together and not believing a word that she says.
Yes.
So she dangles the Joffrey thing.
Yes. So when Sansa says, well, I love him, she's like, I know you love him, child, because why else should you have come to me and told me of your father's plans to send you away from us, if not for love? And Sansa's like, it was for love. Father wouldn't even give me leave to say farewell. So this is what a lot of people hate Sansa for, because Sansa went to the queen behind Ned's back and told her of his plans to send them away after Ned told her that she couldn't say bye to Joffrey. This is Sansa's inner thoughts. She was the good girl, the obedient girl, but she had felt as wicked as Arya that morning, sneaking away from Septim Ordain, defying her Lord Father. She had never done anything so willful before, and she would never have done it then if she hadn't loved Joffrey as much as she did. He was going to take me back to Winterfell and marry me to some hedge knight, even though it was Joff I wanted. I told him, but he wouldn't listen. The king had been her last hope. The king could command father to let her stay in King's Landing and marry Prince Joffrey. Sansa knew he could, but the king had always frightened her. He was loud and rough-voiced and drunk as often as not, and he would probably have just sent her back to Lord Eddard, if they even let her see him. So she went to the queen instead and poured out her heart, and Cersei had listened and thanked her sweetly. Only then Sir Aerys had escorted her to the high room in Maegor's holdfast and posted guards, and a few hours later, the fighting had begun outside. So, yeah, Sansa went and told Cersei of Ned's plans because Sansa didn't want to end up in Winterfell married to a hedge knight.
I think she's being a bit dramatic here. Number one, Ned wouldn't have just married her off to some hedge knight.
Yeah, but it was in her
status, but she's just being so dramatic about all this.
She
in the wrong way. She's being dramatic about the wrong shit.
Yeah, she is. And the whole thing is that she wanted to be queen.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted
she got it in her head. Like if this visit from Robert and the whole court up to Winterfell had never happened, she never would have gotten that in her head. But once it was there, it was there.
And growing to the point that she's having dreams about people kneeling to her and sitting beside Joffrey in golden dresses. And like she even says like to Arya, like, when I'm queen, you'll have to kneel before me and call me your grace. It's alive. It's a very alive fantasy in her head. And she wasn't ready to give it up.
Well, no. I mean, that was the top of the, the best that she could have possibly even dreamed of, or that she couldn't have even dreamed of because it was so good.
Yeah. So what they do is the small council plays this mind game with Sansa, where they say, is she a traitor? Is she not a traitor? Her father's a traitor, so she'll be a traitor too. All that shit. Like Littlefinger there, like it's just
they're kind of playing good cop, bad cop with her.
Yeah.
Well, Littlefinger's like, oh, but she's so much like her mother and so dutiful and this and that. And Varys is like, well, but the whole traitor thing. And Pycelle is piping in, and I don't know if his opinion really means much to Cersei anyhow, but they're just all back and forth. And she is about to go into a panic again over the whole thing.
I feel like they had this plan before she came. Like, we're going to do it this way, and we're going to get her to write this letter. So they have her listening to their bickering back and forth, and they're like, just so she can feel like she's like her life is in the balance right now. And she says, child, if I could truly believe that you are not like your father, why nothing should please me more than to see you wed to my Joffrey. I know he loves you with all his heart. And yet, I fear that Lord Barris and Grand Maester have the right of it. The blood will tell. I have only to remember how your sister set her wolf on my son. And Sansa's like, I'm not like Arya. I'm good. As Septim Ordain, she'll tell you, I only want to be Joffrey's loyal and loving wife. They can't ask Septim Ordain because Septim Ordain is dead. She doesn't know that yet.
Right?
And like she says it, like Sansa's like, she could feel the weight of Cersei's eyes on her. Like Cersei studying her face. And Cersei's like, I believe you mean it. I believe you mean it. My lords, it seems to me that if the rest of her kin were to remain loyal in this terrible time, that would go a long way towards laying our fears to rest. And that's when they decide, like, they're like talking about Ned's sons and Lady Catelyn. And they basically ask Sansa to write to her mother and her brother, Robb, and inform them of like the word of your Lord Father's treason will no doubt reach them soon. Better that it should come from you. You must tell them how Lord Eddard betrayed his king. And they're like, basically convincing her to write a letter to Robb and to Lady Catelyn and telling them to keep the king's peace and not basically don't form an army, like don't do anything. Like basically
Right.
just do what the Lannisters want you to do.
Well, and another thing I thought was really interesting with this bickering, where they were kind of playing games with her mind, they knew what they wanted her to do. They wanted her to write these letters so that it gave the claims of Ned's betrayal and treason more validity if it came from Sansa than if it came from Grand Maester Pycelle or Cersei or anyone else. But putting Sansa in the middle of it and having her make this quote-unquote choice, they're making her feel like she is a part of this and that she is doing something good, and she's so mature and so grown up and so trustworthy. Like they're just reeling her in more.
Yeah, that's true.
Making her feel like she has a part to play and like she matters to anything.
And another interesting part, like to add on to that, is when she's like, well, maybe if I can just speak to my father first. And Cersei's like, you disappoint me. So it's kind of telling her, if you don't do this exactly how we are saying, then fuck you, basically.
Yeah.
That's how it comes across. Especially to somebody that like Sansa, who's been sitting in this the whole time and she doesn't really know what's going on. Like she's really behind the 8 ball here.
Oh God, yeah.
She just does it. So she like goes to say like, I only meant, and then like just the look on Cersei's face, she's just like kind of wants to know what, like if her father's okay.
Yeah, she backtracks that.
Yeah, she backtracks it, but she does end up writing the letter. She does end up writing.
Yeah,
the
she
letter.
sends one to, what is it? Her brother, her mom, her grandfather, and her aunt, who are all very, very major houses.
Yeah. She's like, I'll write the letters. With a smile as warm as the sunrise, Cersei Lannister leaned close and kissed her gently on the cheek. I knew you would. Joffrey will be so proud when I tell him what courage and good sense you've shown here today. In the end, she wrote 4 letters to her mother, Lady Catelyn Stark, to her brother at Winterfell, and to her aunt and her grandfather as well, Lady Arryn and Lord Hoster Tully. By the time she had done, her fingers were cramped and stiff and stained with ink. Theirs had her father's seal. She warmed the pale white beeswax over a candle, poured it carefully, and watched the eunuch stamp each letter with the direwolf of House Stark. So when she gets back to the room, Gene Poole and all her things are gone. Now she's like, no more weeping, she thought gratefully. Yet somehow it seemed colder with Jean gone, even after she'd built a fire. She pulled a chair close to the hearth, took down one of her favorite books, and lost herself in the stories of Florian and John Quill, of Lady Sheila and the Rainbow Knight, of valiant Prince Aemon and his doomed love for his brother's queen. It was not until later that night, as she was drifting off to sleep, that Sansa realized she had forgotten to ask about her sister. And that is how the chapter ends. And I like that.
Yeah.
Because Sansa and Arya's relationship is very much a weird relationship. It's sisterly, but it's kind of...
It's rocky.
It's very rocky. Like even when Arya is in Essos with the many-faced god in the tower, like she doesn't really think of Sansa that much, and if she does, it's never like my sister Sansa. It's like, I knew a girl that loved lemon cakes, like, you know. It's very distant, like it's very distant. And I feel like, you know, what happened on the king, like Sansa and Arya didn't have a close relationship in Winterfell. Like we see that Arya has a lot of resentment towards Sansa in Winterfell. And when they leave, the whole thing with Micah and the direwolf or lady on the King's Road, and like Nymeria happened to be sent away, and like all of that, like Sansa not protecting her sister, like all of that had an effect on Arya and Sansa's relationship for sure. Of course, like sisters are going to argue, especially young sisters. But at the same time, it does show, even though she didn't ask in the moment, she was still thinking about her sister that night.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still there.
Yeah, that relationship still exists for sure. And it sounds like she almost feels bad that she didn't ask
She does.
about Arya because, well, she's realized that, her one friend is gone and she's trying to feel good about what she did. But I think that's why she dives into her books, because she's trying to escape whether or not she did the right thing.
Yeah.
Even if she doesn't know that consciously she's doing that. And then she realizes just how alone she is. I mean, she doesn't even have her septa there, which, like you said, because she's dead. But Sansa doesn't even really care to think about why this woman who's been with her since birth isn't around anymore.
Yeah. It's a very sad chapter. And I feel like the way that it ends with Sansa, like, oh, I just realized I didn't ask about Arya.
Mm-hmm.
She feels like the void. Like she feels the void of like what you're saying. She's truly alone and you haven't heard anything from Arya. You don't know where she is. Luckily, she's not dead, but you're not going to see her for a long time if you ever see her again, because we don't know if they'll ever see each other again. But I feel like in a situation where they do see each other again, Sansa is going to appreciate Arya so much for who she is. And she's gonna like that season 8 shit where like they like were being weird to each other. No, season 7 where they were like being weird to each other and trying to plot to kill each other. And then Bran had to like CCTV Sansa. Like, like it was so fucking weird because I don't see that happening. Like book Sansa is so much smarter than show. Like show Sansa is like mean girlish and very kind of vindictive. And then to Arya, like I don't feel like that's gonna be a thing in their relationship. I feel like Sansa is gonna be like, first of all, Arya is a lot more mature than she was when they were in King's Landing together and when they were in Winterfell together. And they've both been through a lot of traumas. So when they find their way back to each other, they're gonna be very much appreciative of each other, I feel.
Yeah, and I think Sansa is going to look back on how she and Arya were to each other as children and in King's Landing and realize that she really took Arya for granted because Arya was smart. Like she caught on to more of what was going on than Sansa did. And she would try to say something and Sansa would just freak out because Arya was talking shit about Joffrey and Cersei and
Like, I
and all
hate the
that.
queen. I hate her. I don't want to go in her wheelhouse. Fuck that stupid queen.
Exactly.
And Sansa
And Sansa's going to look back on it and be like, you were right. And I think with the way Sansa evolves through the books, I don't think it would actually take much for her to admit that.
Yeah.
To admit when she's fucked up.
I agree.
At least I hope not. I like the trajectory she's going in the books, and I hope we just kind of keep on going on in that direction. Like she keeps getting smarter, she keeps getting a little bit more independent, a little more self-reliant, getting things done. I hope she goes in that direction. I made a video about that, and I don't know if it'll happen, but I really hope it does.
Well, you have to send me your link to your channel so I can link it in the description box.
I will, for sure.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, not really. I understand why this chapter makes so many people hate Sansa the way they do. And I get the argument that her actions caused a lot of catastrophic events.
Yes.
But we can only blame her so far. I mean, Catelyn made similar fuck-ups, and she's a grown-ass woman. Like, we can hate her for her shit. But an 11, 12-year-old girl, I mean, she's just trying to figure out which way's up in all this.
Book Sansa is like a Game of Thrones book 1 Sansa is pretty unbearable.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like a lot of the Sansa hate is show related. like for me specifically, it's show related and it's a Game of Thrones Sansa. And it's the betrayal of your family, when the houses that make you are Starks, who are so honorable, and the Tully's family duty honor, and you just like forsake all that shit. So I get it, but at the same time, it doesn't make me like her anymore. It just, I don't know. I feel like the show really fucked her up for me. The show really fucks Sansa up for me. So when I've been doing this reread, I've been trying to be more compassionate towards Sansa, but still at the same time, there's my compassion only goes so far. So I hate that she betrayed her father in this chapter. I hate that, like, you're the reason this girl's dad is dead. This girl is going to be like in the future. I mean, I'm talking about Jane Poole here. Like in the future, she's going to have to go through so much traumatic shit because of this decision. So this decision was like the big boom. I mean, there was a lot of decisions, but this one was the period at the end of the sentence.
Yeah, for sure. Like half of the events that transpire for other characters like Jane, for example, wouldn't have happened without this butterfly effect that Sansa started.
Right.
And exactly. I don't know for sure if Catelyn and Robb would have reacted in quite the same way that they did. I mean, I'm sure they still would have wanted to go to war with the Lannisters over what happens to Ned and everything. But drawing Sansa into it just hit hard. Yeah. It hit different.
Yeah, I agree.
So she really did cause the butterfly effect that just affected everything and everyone.
Yep, she did. And this is that chapter. This is a hard one. It's a good chapter, but it's a hard one if you don't like Sansa. It's a hard one if you do like Sansa, because you can only excuse so much, and this you can't really excuse. We've given excuses for her, but at the same time, you can't excuse but so much. So that is Sansa 4, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you for coming, Casey. I will leave all of your links in the description box. As always, thanks for listening and have a good day. Bye.